Hello, so in this video, I'm joined by Steve Cook, coordinator of the Regional Resource Center here at Mohawk Valley Community College. And Steve, in his role as the coordinator, has come to us with a federal law enforcement background as a U.S. Marshal. He also has a master's degree in cybersecurity and is actually working on a second. So welcome today, Steve. Happy to have you.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'd like to, if we could just start, just to introduce briefly to everybody, as your role in the coordinator of the Regional Resource Center, describe what you do and why someone might need to come to you for something.
My responsibility as a coordinator entails helping provide assistance to institutions in the Northeast that are seeking to achieve the CAE designation. And we do this by providing professional workshops, mentorship, training, as well as guidance to the institutions throughout the designation process.
Cool. And in this process, or in this role here at Mohawk Valley, you've been kind of exposed to a lot of the extracurriculars that we have here, namely having a cybersecurity club, our programs, as well as being involved with the hackathon. I guess the question kind of here for you is, as you've transitioned into this role, where did you start? How did you get involved in these efforts? And how has that transition been as you've kind of built yourself into this coordinator role?
Well, I'm not in the classroom a lot, so I've actually concentrated on building relationships with some of the students. I'm not in the classroom, but I do have a lot of contact with them throughout the day. So I've made attempts to get to know them through managing student assistants that we have that work on our virtual system. And I've also made appearances at some of the club meetings, as well as some classroom activities. I've sat in there just to get my face out there, make myself familiar to some of the students on campus here.
Okay, so that's helped quite a bit, I'm sure, then, in getting involved with the students on campus. Maybe, for example, for the hackathon, have you gotten involved with students from other schools, or for the event itself? How has that process kind of been for you?
Well, for the last hackathon, actually the one we had on MVCC's campus, I was responsible for keeping track of the registration for some of the students. Mm-hmm. That dealt with a lot of different colleges, students from different areas of the state. And then once they were on campus, I made a point of going around talking to them, making sure they knew who I was and what I was here for, and just kind of building relationships with them in that way.
Okay. I guess in this process of kind of getting your feet wet and getting involved with a lot of the stuff we have going on here at MV, have you had to expand your skill sets or improve upon them in some way to find keeping up or to be helpful, or has it been a nice, easy, smooth transition for you?
The transition hasn't been difficult, but I have had to develop different skill sets based on what my responsibilities here are for the RSE. That's mostly building better proficiency with the Office, Microsoft Office. I've obviously had experience with Word. It didn't really go beyond that. I needed to get more familiar with some of the publishing software, as well as Excel, and basically improve my organizational skills. In my previous role as a surveillance investigator, basically had done that job so long that it was second nature. So coming into this environment, I definitely had to build some organizational skills. There's a lot of different things going on at once. I had to kind of juggle all that and make sure I kept track of what was going on with the different projects here at the RSE.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to as well, being a club advisor myself, that having the organizational skills to keep track of what the students are doing is something that one of the unwritten jobs, let's say, or skill sets that all of a sudden you find yourself trying to manage a lot of different students across different semesters, and
right.
Improving those is really helpful, regardless of whether you're the advisor or whether you're the coordinator. What about technical skills? Has there been any technical skills that you've found useful to develop in this process?
Linux command line skills have been something I've had to brush up on. I had a little bit of experience with that during my first master's, doing labs, things like that. Mm-hmm. But even at that level, it was limited. I've had to go back and actually take some courses on Linux to become familiar with that in order to be a greater asset during the hackathon and administering our virtual systems here.
Yeah, definitely. I can agree with that. That having additional Linux skill is just, it never seems like you can have enough. There's always something more.
Right. And there's definitely a lot to it. So
yeah. Oh, okay, great. I guess one of the next things I wanted to ask you was what you've seen, kind of being a little bit of a newer member here of the organization. How do you see this benefiting the students? And maybe if you could relate it, if there is a specific experience you might have had as you went through your higher education. But just summarizing that, I think I'd like to hear about that.
Well, as far as the hackathon goes, I think that's very beneficial to the students because it gives some practical experience as far as it's different from classroom instruction. You don't have the practical experience in classroom instruction, but at the hackathon, you're actually defending services from attacks. And it's nice to talk about that in the classroom, but the hackathon gives you an opportunity, gives the students an opportunity to actually apply those skills and see what it would be like in the real world, defending against attacks, things like that.
Okay. Have you seen any benefits to the students as far as actually getting a job or life beyond college?
I haven't. That's one of the things I would like to improve on here at the RRC is actually keeping track of what the students do afterwards. It's difficult because it obviously would be voluntary, and once they get out of the classroom environment and go out into the world, it's difficult to get them to maintain some sort of relationship. So I think that's something that we need to work on improving so we can talk to these guys and see what we did and what we can improve on and what worked and what didn't as far as once they get out into the workforce.
Okay. Also, kind of being a new member, I think you have sort of a fresh set of eyes, let's say, to some of the things that we've been doing for the past few semesters or past few years. And I guess in this experience, or from your perspective, do you see any particular common pitfalls or negative experiences or things that either on the student end or on the organization end you might recommend for any faculties or mentors that are looking to start a club or get involved in hackathons? What are some of the common pitfalls and negative experiences that we might want to be aware of?
I haven't really been here long enough to say I haven't seen anything negative per se. I've seen things that might be done better. As far as organizationally, I think staying on top of the moving parts that are involved in, for example, setting up the hackathon, I think that's important to stay on top of it and to do things sooner rather than later and not wait till the last minute. I think waiting till the last minute runs the risk of affecting the students' experience at the hackathon. So just all the little details that go into setting it up, from ordering things, registration, and that's partly what I'm here for, is to make sure that that stuff goes smoothly. And I'm a big fan of staying on top of it and making sure things get done sooner rather than later.
Yeah, that really reminds me of how, again, being an advisor in a club, how really reinforcing not just to the students, but also to myself, the person kind of in charge or trying to give some guidance and direction to the clubs, that we need to do things like register. We need to do things like fill out how many T-shirts we want and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Assume to
the little details.
Exactly, all those little details. Waiting for the last minute is it just doesn't always work. So
right.
Being on top of that stuff, I can see being really important. The other thing that kind of reminds me of is what kind of example are we setting for the students? And if from an organizational point of view, if us ourselves are not organized very well, they'll pick up on that, or they'll just we want to teach them to be proactive professionals about that. So okay, so if somebody wanted to contact you for either a regional resource thing or to follow up on the regional hackathon, how can they get in touch with you? What's the best way for that?
Email is probably the best. They can reach me at scook at mvcc.edu.
Okay.
And that would be the best way to get a hold of me. I'm up on it all day, on my phone, on the computer, so it's available all the time to me. It'd be the best way to get me.
Okay, great. So again, if anybody had an issue for Steve, either a CAE question or something for the Regional Resource Center, we'd like to coordinate to the NSA, or for the Regional Hackathon advice, et cetera, you can reach him, you can reach out to me, and either of us would be happy to try to get your issue directed further. So thanks again for joining me today, Steve. And,
thank you, James. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
All right, thanks.